Hello, folks. This is Nathan Chua again, coming from you from the Philippines. I'm a counselor here in Metro Manila, Quezon City in particular, and I'm here again to talk with somebody who practices in the US. It's the state of Oregon, and I've had him before in a previous interview, and he's one of the people I've learned so much from when it comes to ACT and RFT. And I continue to recommend his book willingly, um, ACT for Spiritual Development. Is that did I get the title correctly, Hank? All right. It's a pretty long title. So anyway, I think mm, after reading probably the simplest, most understandable ACT book for me, Get Out of Your Mind into Your Life. Willingly act for spiritual development is also one of those, and that's I think what you advocate for, Hank. Um, he advocates for making things simple for everyone to understand. As ACT and RFT are very, like let's say, tricky subjects. But once you get to know, it's actually quite simple. It's just that the language to get to the language is difficult. All right. So good morning. I mean, good afternoon there, Hank. It's good morning here.
Yes, I am a blast from the past for you. It's still
Okay.
Thursday while it's Friday for you.
Yeah. I still remember our first interview. I was shocked that you're one of those people who's talked to Albert Ellis and you actually became his mentee. Is that correct?
Yes, I
Mm.
went through the full training program with what at that time was rationally motive therapy and then eventually became rationally motive behavior therapy.
Yes, yes. And pretty good segue to my first question, Hank. And this has been kind of an area of curiosity for me. As I've learned more about ACBS, which is our Association for Contextual Behavioral Science, it's based in the US. I've never seen the office, I've never been there. I don't even know where it is exactly. uh, I've noticed, there seems to be a bit of a, let's say, an area where ideas diverge. So I've noticed some practitioners emphasizing staying closely aligned with contextual behavioral science, or CBS, and its philosophical foundations, while others integrate approaches from outside the model. So, as you said, you've been heavily influenced by Albert Ellis, and I still use one of your metaphors about the licorice. That if you, let's say, if you look somewhat like me and you're not as good looking, then you'd have to try dating more, right? In order to get the partner you want, right? So, how do you personally navigate that? What guides your decisions about when to stay with contextual behavioral science and when, if ever, to draw from other approaches? Because I'm more veering towards being very careful with, you know, turning out to be more eclectic than integrated.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Well,
So,
when I've been around the psychological world for a while, I
mhm.
started graduate school in 1972, and graduate school in 1972 largely meant uh, the first wave of behavior therapy.
Hmm.
And so I was familiar way back then with a publication by a guy named Arnold Lazarus, who was one of the founding members of the um, Association for the Advancement of Behavior Therapy, as it was called then.
Mm,
And very early on in 1967, he actually wrote a paper that was titled Technical Eclecticism.
mm,
And the point of that paper was that you can look for techniques and be very eclectic about those, but not be eclectic about theories.
mm,
Because his point was that if you
mhm,
draw from this theory and this theory and that theory, then pretty soon you're going to have a bunch of theories that don't make any sense in relation to one another.
mhm,
So I thought that argument was very persuasive,
mhm,
and he carried forward with it and eventually developed what he called multimodal behavior therapy
mhm,
and what he called the basic id. Now, Lazarus had come from South Africa and, like Albert Ellis, was a fully trained psychoanalyst. He had
mhm,
been through a full training analysis, found it unsatisfactory, and connected with another South African, uh, uh, Wolpe, who was a physician, not a psychologist. And that's how he made his way into behavior therapy, but he found it too constrictive. So he used that kind of tongue in cheek, uh, talking about the basic id, um, and he used the letters to stand for several aspects that he thought that needed to be included,
mhm,
namely B for behavior, A for affect, S for sensations.
mhm,
By sensations, he meant physical experiences like tension or other bodily sensations,
mhm,
imagery, cognition, interpersonal relations, and finally, drugs and biology was the D for the last id. Now, if you think about it, this actually looks a lot like the extended evolutionary meta model, in which we very systematically go through such categories as cognitions and sensations and so on. So, this idea of we can take techniques that fit within our theory, whether or not we created them or not, and use those techniques, but not trying to simply take a bunch of theories and stick them together when they really have contradictory ideas or there's no way to bridge the gap theoretically.
mhm. Okay, all right. Yeah, I do so sometimes. Like, there's a little bit of a slight difference. I wrote this in the book, the one in my background,
Mhm.
about my own, let's say, uh, thoughts about the Gottman method. And sometimes I do end up using some of the terms that the Gottmans use, like repair attempts. And I kind of mentioned them to sort of create some awareness to what is happening inside the therapy room, or what the stories they talk about when they're at home, and one is trying to start a repair attempt. So it's kind of like building some awareness within the couple about these attempts, but not really prescribing them in a way. So I think that for me, that is somewhat of an integrative approach, kind of using certain terms, but not actually using them as a like a rule governed type of behavior that they should follow. I don't know. Does that sound like you're my senior, so I want to ask you, does that sound like a sound integrative approach?
Well, um, philosophers actually make a distinction between um, uh, behavior that isn't governed by rules per se, but creating rules because they often work. And that's a very different notion than rule-governed behavior in relational frame theory, or maybe so much even in basic behavior analysis,
Yeah.
because there the idea is you follow the rule no matter what,
Yeah.
rather than you follow the rule because it often works. But
Yes.
then in the particular case that you're dealing with, if it doesn't work, then you do something else.
Yeah.
Now, I think Gottman is particularly interesting because his whole approach is dealing with how at least two people
Yes.
deal with one another.
Mm.
And of course, people even further back who began the family therapy model were looking at more than just the dyad. They were looking at several members of a family and how they all interact.
Mm.
Now, I think this is interesting from the standpoint of the work of the developmental psychologist Michael Tomasello. And I was fortunate enough to be at the last ACBS conference. It wasn't very hard for me since it was in the US and I live in the US. Um, but Tomasello is a developmental psychologist, and he points out that between 2 and 3, young humans are able to engage with others in what he calls joint attention, which is you and me, we're both paying attention to that.
Mm.
But by the time a child reaches 3 or 4,
Mm.
they are able to engage in joint intention, not just joint attention. And that means there's a formation of a we. It's not just you and I,
Mm.
but it's we
Mm.
are trying to do the same thing.
Mm.
Now, I think this formulation of a we and the maintenance of the we
Mm.
is pretty much what people talk about when they talk about common factors.
Mm.
When you're in a treatment consultation relationship with
Mm.
someone,
Mm.
the most effective relationship is
Mm.
one with a we, not
Mm.
just I'm the therapist, I'm the more knowledgeable one, you're the client or the
Mm.
patient, but we jointly are up to something. And
Mm.
things like uh, repair, well, what's the repair about? It's about something has happened to that we-ness. We're no longer together, it's you and I, but not we. And how can we bring that back into existence so that jointly we are intending the same thing?
All right. Okay. Yeah. Sort of like reminds me of TOSF, right? Transformation of stimulus function. So turning the you and I into a we. Okay. All
Yes.
right. Well, that brings me to my next question. We're starting to get a bit more technical here. Sorry, I forgot my drink. It's early in the
Well, I'm
morning
happy
here.
that I remembered mine.
It's supposed to be shrinks over drinks, right? So anyway, so we use this term creative hopelessness a lot in ACT therapy or acceptance and commitment therapy, which is the model of therapy that's derived from relational frame theory. Am I correct in that definition? So, uh, can you explain that to our audience first? And then after that, um, it's supposed to be an emotionally, let's say, rich moment in therapy. And I see that in my clients, they end up in tears sometimes. And it's kind of hard for me to explain that through language, what is going on inside the client when they're in tears. I experienced that myself. You know, when I hear some positive news that I worked so hard for, I just, had some positive news lately. I don't want to jinx it, so I don't want to mention it. I'm just kidding. Anyway, so I was on the verge of tears, realizing how hard I worked for this. It has to do with something about the book, you know. And see, I want uh, to describe it in more precise language. What is happening there, uh, particularly the transformation of stimulus function, and the weakening of control-based relational network or a control-based agenda. All right. So, how would you explain what's happening in creative hopelessness at the level of language or relational frame theory?
Well, first, let me say something about the little rule that control is the problem.
Hmm.
Um, Control is the problem when you can't get control and keep trying to get it.
Yeah.
Control is great. It's not a problem
Mm-hmm.
when it's something you can achieve. So, for example, reaching for my cup and having a little drink of this water is highly controllable and very helpful because it keeps my mouth from getting too dry.
Hmm.
On the other hand, persistently trying to control things that we can't control, that's when control is the problem.
Hmm.
And if you just think about what it takes to attempt to control another human being, you end up in a maximum security prison. And even there, the ultimate control of someone is very, very difficult.
Yeah.
So that's the first kind of input I want to make on the idea that control is the problem. It's only a problem when you keep trying to control things you can't control. Now, the thing about thing about tears is tears can be tricky because we don't always know what the tears are about.
Hmm.
So, for example, people will say that they have tears of joy.
Hmm.
If I heard you correctly, it was some kind of really good news about the book that brought tears to your eyes.
Hmm.
And people at weddings may say that they are shedding tears of joy. Sometimes when people are very angry, their tears come,
Hmm.
and they're not so much tears of sorrow as they are tears of anger. I was surprised to discover that some academic who, in a certain way, had too much time on their hands actually began analyzing chemically tears.
Hmm.
And it turns out, very interestingly, all tears are not the same. They're not
Hmm.
chemically even the same.
Oh.
So, but very often when we're having tears, they are tears of sorrow.
Hmm.
And they signal um, our inability to achieve our desires or the experience of something that we don't want to experience. And either of those cases, we tend to call that sorrow. You're not getting what you want, or you are getting something you don't want. And when it comes to creative hopelessness, um, I would say think about a time when you tried and tried and tried to get some outcome, a particular outcome from your efforts,
Hmm.
and you finally came to something like, this just isn't going to work.
Hmm.
Or to heck with this, I've had enough of it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the hopeless part of creative hopelessness, at
Mm-hmm.
least as far as I understand the term.
Mm-hmm.
I often think of the pursuit of some love interest, more likely when I was a lot younger, and the love interest that you have, they never show any interest
Mm-hmm.
of a reciprocal response. And probably the worst line you can hear from such a person in those circumstances is something like, I love you as a friend, which is sort of the death words for the relationship that you actually want. Now, the creative part is uh, the opportunity that arises by stopping doing one thing to do something else.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that can open up a wide variety of somethings else. Uh, the love interest, well, okay, I could pursue it with another person, but I could also stop pursuing that for a while and just do something else with my time.
Mm-hmm.
So the creative part of creative hopelessness is the opportunity to spend your time and energy doing something other than a thing that you've persisted at that simply doesn't work. Now, if you want to speak about that in terms of something like relational frame theory, then I think your words earlier are exactly the right ones. Namely, there's been a transformation of stimulus functions. Uh, the the thought of pursuing this effort
Mm-hmm.
is in the beginning appetitive.
Mm-hmm.
You want to pursue it.
Mm-hmm.
And you keep doing it and you keep doing it. And I say thought because you're not achieving your aim. So
Mm-hmm.
you're not having the experience of actual success. What you're having is this desire that is fueled by your thoughts of the possibility of succeeding. But when those thoughts no longer are drawing you toward behavior in a certain direction, in
Mm-hmm.
fact, they've lost their power to uh, move you, to motivate you, to urge you in a certain direction. There has clearly been a change, not in the thoughts, but in the way they function. Rather than attract you, they now are repelling you
Mm-hmm.
and opening up an opportunity for new kinds of thoughts. Well, what else could I do?
Mm-hmm.
And oh, well, maybe I could be doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Thank goodness I don't have to keep doing that.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I guess it's a combination of relief, the tears, where the tears are coming from. There's relief. Oh, there's and also a hope that things can change. And I have the ability or a sense of empowerment that I can actually make choices that work towards my goals of living a more meaningful, more purposeful life. Is that the
Well,
transformation of
it
stimulus function there?
it could be a
Mm-hmm.
sense of relief uh, because I don't have to keep doing this,
Mm-hmm.
but it also could just be a deep sorrow of
Mm-hmm.
making contact with not only am I not getting what I want, uh, and I am getting what I don't want, namely rejection, but it's not momentary. It's not just it's bad now, but it'll be better later. It's
Mm-hmm.
that this situation is hopeless. There isn't going to be a better later.
I like
And
that
so
word.
now,
I like that phrase you use, deep sorrow, because I think that captures it, quite vividly. because that's how you feel when you've lost so much time doing the same thing over and over, you know, and you've lost many relationships, opportunities have gone by. Is that what you mean by deep sorrow?
Well, and your striving is not going to pay off.
Mm-hmm.
You're no longer, it's not creative hopefulness,
Mm-hmm.
it's creative hopelessness. You have arrived at the place where not only are you not experiencing it, but you've lost hope that you ever will.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you for that. Uh, okay, we have to move on to the next question. I looked at the time. We already spent half an hour. So it's already a third of our time. Uh, so let me go to a little bit more historical. So there's a long-standing critique of Skinner as being overly focused on control, even dehumanizing. That was my idea when I was doing my undergraduate and graduate studies. We never really talk in depth about Skinner. We just do the ABC, very basic, the operant conditioning, and a little bit of Pavlov also. Uh, so, but as I've gone deeper into his work, you know, I used to say to I mean, I remember in graduate school. Sorry, my something is getting into my eyes. When I was doing my graduate studies, I remember mentioning to my graduate school, one of my graduate school professors, that's kind of scary, you know, we're comparing ourselves to rats and pigeons, you know. But as I've gone deeper into his work, that critique seems incomplete, maybe even misleading. So from your perspective, where do you think Skinner has been most misunderstood? And what impact has that had on how people relate to behaviorism and even act today? So I guess this is more of a question about how behaviorism can be misunderstood by people of today, even today, 2026.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Well,
yeah.
um, uh, let me give you a little history. Um, uh, I had a 4 year stint in the U.S. Navy from 1964 or 68 until 1972. So I had a 4 year pause between my undergraduate work and my entrance into graduate school. And when I went back to graduate school, I knew that I wanted to pursue a degree in counseling psychology because I wanted to make a difference working with people. But I also thought that I should be solidly grounded in psychology itself. Now, this led many of my graduate student contemporaries to think that I was doing a doctorate in learning, not in counseling psychology, because I would frequently talk about basic psychological concepts like operant versus respondent behavior. And I would get in long, after a while, it wasn't too long,
Mhm.
arguments about Skinner. And the reason that the arguments got shorter is I would ask, well, what things of Skinner have you actually read? And the answers usually were nothing. They
Mhm.
had read some things in the textbook, and that was the end of it. So,
Mhm.
first, congratulate you because you've done the work, at least some of it, by actually reading, well, what did he actually say? Uh, and that itself is part of the difficulty I'd begin with, is that most people actually haven't read the stuff that he wrote. They've read things other people have said about it, or they've read things that are in textbooks. Now, I'm not trying to say that everyone who has criticized Skinner simply doesn't know his work. There are plenty of people who have read the work. It's just in my graduate school experience and in my arguments there, I found lots of people were making arguments about something they didn't know that much about. The first problem that Skinner has is that he is a naturalist who denies supernaturalism. And so Skinner is the enemy of every supernaturalist anywhere on the planet. And that's quite a number of enemies to create. Um, and here's what I mean by that. If you think about Genesis and the creation of Adam,
Mhm.
uh, Adam is made out of mud, out of dirt. And then, and then a supernatural being breathes the breath of life into him. Now, uh, the sort of fancy name for that is elan vital or life force. And the notion is that there's a natural world, and then there's some sort of supernatural phenomenon that makes life actually happen.
Mhm.
Um, and the last several hundred years, and particularly post-Darwin, the
Mhm.
idea that life simply couldn't possibly evolve on its own and would require some sort of supernatural intervention has been increasingly dispelled,
Mhm.
but not easily, because the notion that there are two kinds of stuff in the world, natural things and supernatural things, and that there's some kind of interaction between them,
Mhm.
is very strongly held by most humans everywhere.
Mhm.
So Skinner's stance, no, there is not any supernatural stuff.
Mhm.
There's no, I'm not only not interested in supernatural stuff, I don't think it exists. And I want to give an account of how organisms behave, including human organisms, without referring to anything supernatural.
Mhm.
So uh, that very stance sets him up for um, uh, being the target
Mhm.
of people who want to maintain no, 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 no. If you want to understand the behavior of living beings,
Mhm.
and especially living human beings,
Mhm.
you're going to have to turn to some kind of supernatural explanation. Now, the second thing I think about Skinner um, is there is a very big difference between the assumption that everything in the world can be given a causal account, which is just another way of saying every event in the world is determined, versus a very different thing, which is saying I'd like to have a causal account and making efforts to see if I can get one. That's what I'm going to be doing. I'm not going to make an assumption about how the world is. I
Mhm.
am going to make some, uh, let's say, a vision of
Mhm.
something that's possible and pursue that vision. And most people, and maybe even Skinner himself, was insisting that everything in the world is determined. Now, I think you can go with that, but you wouldn't have to. You could simply say, I would like to be able to give a causal account.
Mhm.
Let's go find out if I can.
Mhm.
It's the difference that Skinner does make very plain, and that is there are no laws of nature. Uh, Apples are not consulting a law about whether they're going to fall to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Humans might want to consult laws of gravity if they want to be able to make successful predictions about how certain things will behave under certain circumstances. So there are no laws of nature. There's no lawgiver. Uh, Newton himself said that he was thinking the thoughts of God
Mm-hmm.
because his idea was, well, if there are laws, there must be a lawgiver, and the lawgiver is God. Or
Mm-hmm.
another way to say it is if the universe is a watch, there must be a watchmaker. There
Mm-hmm.
must be a first cause.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, well, why do we have to take that approach?
Mm-hmm.
And Skinner doesn't take that approach. So everyone who sees it differently regard him as somebody to be refuted.
Well, hello. Yeah. Hank? Okay. I'll pause the recording. I kind of lost you.
I can hear you. Can you hear?
All right, sorry about that, folks. I'm back here with Hank Robb. He's a counselor from psychotherapist, should I say, Hank, from Portland, Oregon, and he works with individuals, couples, mostly, right? Yeah, both individuals and couples, right? Okay.
Mostly, that's
And
correct.
sorry about the interruption because I had some bandwidth issues. Um, Now, I probably have to move on to the next question, Hank, and this is kind of relevant to my previous question regarding Skinner being, let's say, misunderstood. All right. So I've noticed
Hmm.
that approaches like acceptance and commitment therapy, and of course, our theory, relational frame theory, are sometimes grouped together with modalities like NLP, stands for neuro linguistic. I forgot the P. Uh,
Programming.
Programming, neuro linguistic programming, and DBT, dialectic behavior therapy. I think these are the two most popular ones, at least here in our country. So, and they kind of bunch them up together as if they belong to the same category of therapeutic techniques. All right. So it becomes a technique. From your perspective, is that a useful way of understanding these approaches, or does it miss something important about contextual behavioral science and what we're trying to do here with CBS?
Well, I think the difficulty comes between the difference between techniques and theory. As we already noted, as far as back as 1967, people like Arnold Lazarus were pointing out that it is one thing to focus on technique and take techniques from a variety of sources or context, and a very different thing to try to stick together a bunch of theories that really don't match up. So, for example, currently we have in the CBS world
Mm,
what's called a process-based approach,
uh-huh,
which is trying to identify important processes of behavioral variation, selection, and repetition to which current techniques can be tied and from which new techniques might flow.
mm,
Now, the aim of contextual behavioral science, uh, which Steve Hayes has been putting forward for years and seems quite satisfactory to me, one that I can sign on to,
mm,
is the prediction and influence of the behavior
mm,
of whole organisms with precision, scope, and depth. And it makes certain constraints
mm,
that it tends to work within, such
mm,
as a pragmatic theory of truth
mm,
rather than a correspondence theory of truth,
mm,
and a monistic, that is only one kind of stuff,
mm,
though a ontological assumption, that is, we're not going to make any comments about the nature of the one kind of stuff in the
mm,
universe.
mm,
Um, and those things are not things you tend to find out or get much of with NLP or DBT, as far as I can tell.
mm, mm. Okay. Yeah. So it's well, I'm kind of disappointed also hearing that from some people. Uh, I don't know. Do you have the same experience? Because I'm going through some continuing education now, and it's actually not familiar to uh, I don't know, at least the professors or even my classmates in graduate school right now. The use of philosophy in our work. So I don't know, did you have the same experience like psychology? I've talked to Jacob Martinez and he shares the same um, experience that psychology used to be taught like it was just a bunch of theories and techniques without any kind of philosophical framework.
Well, sometimes you have the luck of running into just the person you need to meet.
Mm-hmm.
And that happened to me when I entered graduate school
Uh-huh.
because my counseling psychology program was
Mm-hmm.
in a Department of Education.
Mm-hmm.
And the Department of Education had made a rule
Mm-hmm.
uh, that if you hadn't had a philosophy of education course,
Mm-hmm.
which of course all people who come through teacher training, they'd had one,
Mm-hmm.
but people like myself who majored in something else in undergraduate school had not had that course, you were forced to take it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as far as I could tell, the main reason for doing this was to generate full-time equivalence units
Mm-hmm.
for the educational philosophy department.
Mm-hmm.
But it turned out that the person who taught that class,
Uh,
and not surprisingly at all, since the philosophy of education was greatly impacted by John Dewey,
uh,
who was a very uh, uh, luminary in the American pragmatist movement.
okay.
My very first introduction was to pragmatism as a philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, I became very interested in philosophy as the basic ground for what we were doing,
Mm-hmm.
since empiricism is a kind of philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, when you're doing empirical science,
Uh,
you are undertaking a kind of philosophic enterprise,
mm-hmm.
an enterprise that says the most stable kind of knowledge comes from checking your thoughts and your claims about the universe
Mm-hmm.
against actual experience in the universe,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to, well, this is what we've always done,
Mm-hmm.
or somebody who's the ruler and the one in charge says, well, that's what we're doing and
Mm-hmm.
don't give me any stuff about it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I'm actually quoting from another famous pragmatist who very few people have heard of, Charles Sanders Peirce,
Mm-hmm.
and his name is spelled like Pierce, but he pronounced it Peirce.
Mm-hmm.
And he wrote a wonderful little essay called The Fixation of Belief.
Mm-hmm.
And he said there are four ways. One is the method of tradition. We've always done it this way, so it
Mm-hmm.
must be right.
Mm-hmm.
The method of authority, we're the ones who are in charge, so
Mm-hmm.
don't give us any question about what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And the one that I mentioned, which is checking your theories against actual experience. But
Mm-hmm.
the fourth one, the one that I found most interesting, was what he called uh, uh, the practice of tenacity. And
Mm-hmm.
that is, it doesn't matter what happens, we're sticking with it.
Mm-hmm.
And personally, I found this to be a great example when the U.S. got involved in Iraq. They
Mm-hmm.
kept insisting there were weapons of mass destruction. No
Mm-hmm.
one could find any weapons of mass destruction. There
Mm-hmm.
was no evidence whatsoever, and
Mm-hmm.
people just kept sticking with it. So
Mm-hmm.
the method of tenacity is another kind of philosophic outlook that
Mm-hmm.
I think we're better off putting aside.
Yeah, I mean, wow. I mean, that gives me an idea of what the next book I'm gonna read will be. Uh, uh, I mean, I've been trying to go through books about applied behavioral analysis, and it's just too difficult for me with all the shortcuts that they use, like acronyms that they use. You know, like uh,
Well,
it's hard to
I
catch
was
up.
very fortunate.
Yeah.
Yes, I was very fortunate because the first course that I had in behavioral analysis, the back of the book had all of the definitions of all the terms in it.
Oh, okay.
So they were handy and convenient, and I
Yeah.
was able to memorize them all. And once I had memorized them, then it was a lot easier to make sense of the rest of the book.
Yeah, I'm trying to go through Thomas Schabo's, I don't know if I meant pronounce his name correctly, uh, ACT and ABA. So, you know, I it's hard to continue with all the acronyms.
Yes, uh, that whole vocabulary problem uh, is
Yeah.
one that we often run into when
Yes.
we enter some kind of technical training,
Yes.
and and often people don't succeed because the vocabulary gets in the way.
Yeah. That's why I like talking to you, Hank. You make things a lot simpler. Anyway, so let's move on with the interview, or with this discussion. Um, in contextual behavioral science, we talk about language and how it shapes identity and behavior through relational framing. Part of what led me to write this book behind me, Better People, Better Country, was really something that tore my heart, you know, seeing cases where early DSM diagnoses seem to become part of a person's self-story or even identity in a way that may constrain, you know, what you just said, their options or flexibility. So I know that Stephen Hayes is very passionate about this, and I haven't finished the book, but the book was titled Beyond DSM. So
Hmm.
uh, how do you think about the role of diagnostic language in shaping outcomes, especially in cases like suicide? Uh, and I even created a vlog about it because when it happened, it really struck a chord in me. And I saw this documentary about the Philippines and about the way psychology is generally done here, and it's actually using the same disease model to address the very problem that was actually part of a consequence of that approach, So I don't know. I want to know your thoughts about it.
Well, the first thing I would say is that we um, are often way more focused on who we are, and we would be much wiser to be focused on what we most deeply and enduringly desire.
Mm,
And I do recognize that we do have more superficial and short-term desires. So it's worth making a distinction between those and the things that more, as uh, my mentor Albert Ellis might have said, get you in the gut in his East Coast New York accent.
So, sorry, that's
So
the hand
things
I got. That's the hand I got. Is that what you said?
um, get you in your gut.
Okay. All right.
So that things that really are in your heart, you might say, not so much in your head,
Okay.
uh, and not ones that are just momentary or passing, but things that really stay with you day after day, week after week, year after year. So, by example, I only recently noticed that for much of my life, I have said things like this. I want to read such and such a book.
Mm-hmm.
When what I really mean is, I want to have read such and such a book.
Mm-hmm.
Because once I've read it, I'll be able to do something with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like saying, as I once said, I want to learn to play the guitar, when what I really wanted was to already know how to play the guitar so that I could accompany myself when I was singing.
Mm-hmm.
However, if I say something like, uh, I want to go fishing, I never mean I want to have gone fishing. I mean, I want to actively engage in the activity itself.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the reason I'm going at it this way is what we are really talking about is not how to live healthfully. What we're really talking about is how to live wisely.
Mm-hmm.
People who are living wisely want to be healthy, but they want a lot more than that.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, this kind of war between the natural and the supernatural and the natural and the supernatural back and forth, who's in charge of the important stuff, uh, has left those people who want to focus on the natural thinking not about what is wise, but what is healthy. So
Mm-hmm.
people say things like, we want a healthy marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how could a marriage get sick?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what is a virus that attacks a marriage?
Mm-hmm.
What we mean is we want a fulfilling marriage. We
Mm-hmm.
want something that our heart yearns for. And um, so when the trouble with the DSM and similar kinds of documents, the ICD, the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
uh, which is the international document, uh, they are meant to diagnose maladies or illnesses or sickness or something other than errors or mistakes or foolishness. And it's these last three things, making errors rather than the first three things, being sick, that are actually most helpful when it comes to changing and maintaining behavior. So the old behavioral principle of rate behavior, not people,
Mm-hmm.
attend to what people are doing, not who they are or who they think they are,
Mm-hmm.
is far more frequently lost
Mm-hmm.
in these so-called diagnostic documents.
Mm-hmm.
And they're certainly lost in the stories that people often tell themselves about living in a world where we often don't get what we want and often do get what we don't want.
Mm-hmm.
And if that gets mixed up with,
Mm-hmm.
well, it's illness or disease or something like that, we're
Mm-hmm.
just going to be off track. Now, let me try to give you a couple of examples. I had a very difficult time learning how to read,
Mm-hmm.
and that's almost certainly because I suffer with something called dyslexia.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes reading a lot harder. And if I had been the right age, I would have almost certainly got diagnosed with attention deficit disorder
Mm-hmm.
and probably with the hyperactivity thrown in.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what does all that say? It says I have a hard time paying attention to things that don't interest me, and I
Mm-hmm.
have a hard time learning how to read.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if I want to do certain things,
Mm-hmm.
it is much more useful for me to make peace with, I'm going to have to do something that's not easy for me to do,
Mm-hmm.
namely get things out of written material. It doesn't help me very much to say, oh, well, I have dyslexia. I'm a
Mm-hmm.
dyslexic.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a hyperactive. I'm a, anything you want to finish that I am with, it's
Mm-hmm.
not going to be very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
It's much more helpful to focus on here's what I want, here are some troubles I'm running into.
Mm-hmm.
How could I best handle those troubles?
All right.
Now, part of the difficulty is we have no idea how
Hello.
to,
Hello.
hello,
Yeah. Okay.
oh, lost again.
All right. Go ahead. Go ahead. I think I get you back.
Uh, we have no idea how to get people who are practicing helping others act more wisely into our economic system.
Mm-hmm.
We know we have a system for paying healthcare providers,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't have any system for wisdom providers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And yet it's acting wisely. I was very much taken the first time I heard Kelly Wilson say the
Mm-hmm.
phrase, works in the moment, but not in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Because the thing about that is there are things that do work in the moment. They
Mm-hmm.
really do. But we live longer than a moment.
Mm-hmm.
We're really interested in things that work in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
Well, determining what those are and how to go about it, those are cases of wisdom, not
Mm-hmm.
cases of health.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that's a
Yeah.
very long-winded answer to saying, yes, I agree with Steve. I think going about trying to help people with their behavior
Mm-hmm.
by diagnosing their illnesses
Mm-hmm.
is just putting everything on the wrong track.
Okay. Thank you. That's a wonderful way of explaining all this. And yeah, I mean, sometimes wisdom is left to, let's say, the supernatural. That's what I uh, experience here in the Philippines. Like science has no part in this. So thank you. That was a wonderful explanation, Hank. That's what I love about talking with you is I get things from a different perspective, and it sounds very simple and very, let's say, adaptable to you know people who don't really get into the technical terms. So my one
Well,
last
thank you,
question.
because that's certainly one of my aims is to make things more digestible. Uh,
Yes.
E equals m squared is simple, but it is not simplistic.
Yes.
And
All
there's an
right.
important difference. So
Yes.
how do you keep all of the power and the energy in the ideas you're putting forth but to make the ideas in a way that they can actually be consumed.
All right, thank you. Oh my, it's too bad I'm having some internet issues. I'm checking now, and the speed is really, you know, not up to speed, so to speak. All right. So, um, yeah, but this is my last question for this discussion, Hank. Uh, I remember a graduate class, and one of my professors say, "Well, what are we gonna do? We're just gonna have to help people, help society change one person at a time, you know. So that's our job, okay?" But I'm kind of like there's a kind of a Steve Jobs inside of me. This a bit stubborn. I said, uh, I've held on to the belief that psychology can be used for the greater good at the level of society, just not just individuals, couples, or individual families. That
Mhm.
idea is something I explored in my book, Better People, Better Country. The title itself kind of gives that away. And it echoes for me what I didn't know of. I only found out about it when Stephen Hayes started talking about the book that inspired him to become a psychologist or a behaviorist, which is B.F. Skinner's Walden 2. And that was what he was,
Mhm.
I think, trying to achieve, applying behavioral science to, creating a better society. From your perspective, how realistic is it to scale contextual behavioral science beyond the individual to communities and even countries like ours? I don't know if you're familiar with the news here in my country, where there's been a lot of corruption scandals lately, and we're one of the most vulnerable countries when there are external factors or natural disasters that come through our country very frequently. So, uh, what are your thoughts about it, and what would that actually require in our practice?
Well, I tried to address this in one of the chapters of the book that I wrote,
Hmm.
and my idea is to begin with uh, groups of people uh, paying attention to um, I'm her name is going to get away from me, the um, Nobel Prize winner who uh, addressed a so-called problem of the commons and pointed out there are a
Uh,
few principles that if people are going to operate in common, that they need to keep in view, and then they will successfully operate in common.
Eleanor
And
Ostrom. Eleanor
what would
Ostrom.
these, yes, Eleanor Ostrom.
Hmm.
And so, what would these groups be like?
Hmm.
Well, using principles, psychological principles, and taking the assumptions that we find in contextual behavioral science, namely a pragmatic truth criteria, um, we first, as members of this group, try to determine those things that we deeply and enduringly care about. Now, that's not easy because we will very quickly know what we deeply and enduringly are supposed to care about. But that's not the same thing as what actually touches our heart. So, the group's efforts are to help each individual find, well, what is it that I most deeply actually care about? And then, what are the things that are getting in the way of my pursuing those things that I actually and deeply care about? So, you are a regular member of such a group. And once you have determined, well, what is it that I deeply and enduringly care about? You go out to find other people who want to pursue those things. Now, the members of the group, they don't all have to want to pursue those things. The members of the original group are only there to help you with the impediments, the things that get in your way of pursuing them. Like we would say, uh, trouble with committed action or difficulty of being in the present moment. Uh, the aim is not to act only for the present moment. The aim is to act in the present moment for the things that we find most uh, enduring and deeply touching our heart. So the members of the group, they may all have different things that really move them, and they go out into the world to find other people who hopefully are also participating in similar groups to do the things that they find most important, that they want to make most important in their lives. But they also maintain their sort of home group, the place that people regularly meet to talk about, well, what is it that I'm really deeply and enduringly concerned about and interested in? We don't all, it's not the same for all of us, but we all of us are trying to find that. And we're trying to help one another address the things that get in the way of pursuing it, so that when we go back to the group where everyone is aiming in the same direction, you might say that all the oars are pulling in the direction of, hey, let's have less corruption and more transparency in our governmental proceedings. Okay, well, that's what that group is interested in. We're all going to be doing that. But then we also stay with our home group that helps try to keep us grounded. So, in short, there are at least two we's. There's the we in the group that helps one another stay grounded to what's really important and what's getting in their way. And there's the group that we belong to pursue those things that we want to make most important. I think um, uh, there's a famous uh, anthropologist, Margaret Mead, who said something to the effect, anything that's ever been done has been done by a small group of people who won't give up.
Mhm.
And so we don't necessarily have to try to change big systems,
Mhm.
but by acting in relatively small groups,
Mhm.
we can affect big systems.
Mhm.
And that's how I would encourage going about it.
All right. Okay. Oh, Hank, I wish we could do more, but I think my internet is is not working the way I had expected it, and I'd hate to, continue this and turn out a choppy recording. So, uh, well, too bad I didn't have a backup for today. So, uh, but anyway, I'd like to thank you again, Hank, for doing this, and I always appreciate you know your way of looking at things from your use of the language that makes these very difficult topics to discuss more accessible to everyone, including me. I mean, the way you phrased things really helps me. I still use, this is my nose. And, so many metaphors I learned from you and appreciate it. And yeah, willingly act for spiritual development. I like the way you use the word willingly. Uh, okay, so
Yes, willingly acknowledge and willingly choose. And then for the last part that we were just talking about, willingly teach others. There'll never be enough of us if we aren't busily teaching others what we have learned
mhm,
about wisely making our way in life. And so I want to thank you for the opportunity to put some of these ideas out into the world where people will have a chance to reject them, but also maybe take hold of them and begin to move themselves uh, in a direction that deeply and enduringly uh, meets their desires.
All right. Thank you, Hank. And as always, take care and enjoy your fishing. It's fishing season, right? Right now, is it?
It is that. It
All
is
right.
that.
Okay. You take care and uh, hope to see you again.
Yes. Be good to